Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. A court in New Zealand has heard that the man who killed 51 people at 2 mosques in Christchurch in 2019 had plans to target a third mosque.
The planned time for entry was to ensure the maximum number of worshippers would be present.
The Australian Brenton Tarrant also said to the court he planned to burn down the mosques, wanting to inflict as many fatalities as possible. He has pleaded guilty to 51 counts of murder, 40 attempted murders and 1 charge of terrorism. The 29-year-old faces life in prison, possibly without parole, a sentence never before imposed in New Zealand. Protests have erupted in the US state of Wisconsin after police shot a black man several times while responding to what they said was a domestic incident. Jacob Blake is in a serious condition in hospital after being shot in the back as he tried to get into a car in the city of Kenosha.
They set it on fire. Yeah.
Local authorities have declared an overnight curfew after sometimes violent demonstrations following the shooting. Hundreds of people marched on police headquarters while vehicles were set on fire and protesters shouted, "We won't back down." Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers condemned the shooting of Mr. Blake, who was reportedly unarmed. Protesters have once again filled the Belarusian capital Minsk despite threats by Alexander Lukashenko that the army could be brought in. Footage released on a social media channel close to Mr. Lukashenko showed the president clad all in anti-riot gear and holding a rifle, observing the protests from inside a helicopter. He can be heard saying they've run away like rats as he orders the pilot to move closer. Shortly after landing, he went to congratulate a cordon of riot police who applauded the president. Protests have been ongoing for 2 weeks since Mr. Lukashenko declared victory in an election widely believed to have been rigged against the united opposition candidate Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. A bombing in a town on a southern Philippines island has killed more than 13 people and wounded at least 70, with Islamist militants suspected of being behind the attack. 2 explosions, believed to be homemade bombs, were triggered within an hour of each other in the main urban centre on the island of Jolo, a stronghold of a militant group that has pledged alliance to Islamic State. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, and police said an investigation is underway. A delegation from the West African regional bloc ECOWAS and members of Mali's military junta say they have reached agreement on several points after a day of negotiations. The military leaders have proposed a military-led transitional body to rule for 3 years with a mandate to review the foundations of the Malian state. The junta has also agreed to release ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. ECOWAS has called repeatedly for Mr. Keïta to be reinstated, but thousands of Malians took to the streets of the capital Bamako last week to show their support for the coup. In Peru, at least 13 people have died in a stampede as partygoers tried to flee a nightclub in the capital Lima after it was raided by police. According to a police report, people became trapped between the only entrance, which was closed, and a staircase leading to the street. 11 men and 2 women between the ages of 20 and 30 died. The club's owners were both detained in the aftermath of the raid. At least 12 people have been killed as 2 storms swept through the Caribbean. Hurricane Marco and Tropical Storm Laura brought high winds and rough seas, leaving at least 9 people dead in Haiti and another 3 in the Dominican Republic. Heavy rains have also battered Cuba and US territory of Puerto Rico. Marco is expected to make landfall in the US state of Louisiana in the next few hours. A possible attack on a pipeline in Syria has caused a nationwide blackout overnight. That's according to the Syrian state news agency. State television broadcast footage of a large fire following the explosion, which officials told state media occurred northwest of the capital Damascus. Energy Minister Ali Ghanem has declared there are initial indications it was a terrorist attack. And finally, youths volunteering at an archaeological dig in central Israel have found 425 gold coins that have laid buried in a clay jar for 1,100 years. Most of the money dates back to the early Islamic period when the region was part of the Abbasid Caliphate. Archaeologists underline how exceptional finding gold coins in excavations is, as gold has always been extremely valuable and as such melted down and reused from generation to generation. The coins would have been worth a huge sum when they were buried, but who owned the cachet and why they never returned to collect it remains a mystery. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.